I've had a big breakthrough over the past 3 years in my professional life and in my personal life, where I've moved from having been a scapegoat in my setting as a clergy woman in the Protestant Presbyterian Church, moving from the shame and isolation and abuse of having been a scapegoat to realizing that the scapegoat part of my identity is actually part and parcel of my strengths as a human being. And so I really shifted my understanding of no longer being in a victim mentality of, I can't believe this institution could do this to me, to really reclaiming who I am based on the fact that my strengths as a leader, as a woman, as a human being are actually why I was scapegoated in the first place within a toxic and unhealthy system. And so I share this because I have found that the clients that I work with who themselves have been scapegoated are some of the most incredible human beings. And I love journeying with women in particular who are reframing this experience of having been scapegoated into a position of strength and resilience and vitality, understanding that all of the aspects of why they were scapegoated in the first place are what make them be stand out, incredibly strong and resilient human beings. So I'm going to share just the top few aspects of what it means to be a scapegoat and why these are actually really incredible human strengths to have. So typically we understand scapegoating as being this individual within a community or a larger group that's identified as being the person to be blamed for whatever complexities or conflict is in the community. And even biblically, it's part of scripture and is kind of embedded into theologies where sort of the sins of the community are imposed on this innocent being in literally the goat that's sent out into the wilderness to sort of cleanse the community of this conflict. And so in human terms, that looks like an individual within a toxic and unhealthy system is taking on the anxiety and conflict within a system and actually being literally blamed, pushed out, and sort of thrown into the wilderness or thrown into the wolves, so to speak. And some survive, some thrive, but for the most part, it's a very painful experience of asking oneself, how is this happening and why is this happening to me? But here are some strengths. If you've been scapegoated or if you're asking yourself, is this happening to me in my family system or in my workplace system? This may be you. And there's hope in reclaiming these as core aspects of self. First of all, your honesty and truth telling. You're not inclined to take on a scripted narrative from a larger system. And so your ability to place a mirror up to narratives of control and manipulation make you sort of this easy scapegoat target. The fact that you don't blindly follow the herd. You're not prone to groupthink is a really incredible human strength. And gosh, it would really prevent a lot of the atrocities in the world if more of us were less inclined to groupthink. So scapegoats typically do not blindly follow the herd and are then easily targeted by that larger toxic system. You, as a scapegoat, are most likely an independent thinker. And again, what a strength to have when you're part of these larger toxic narratives of control, ingrained expectations of how to be and act in the world, and you don't kind of follow that script. A really powerful trait to have, really easy trait to be targeted in a scapegoat situation. You are willing to speak out on important issues, particularly with regard to social justice. This is incredibly important in institutions today who are having generational shifts around what it means to be community and to be inclusive and be equitable institutions. Oftentimes that causes scapegoats to be targeted, those who are really calling out issues of inclusivity and equality in these institutions. Scapegoats also have incredible emotional strength and resilience, which is why oftentimes if one is scapegoated, it's an opportunity to then reframe and reposition yourself in a more healthy and better context, which is what I do with many of the clients that I work with who've been scapegoated. So as I talk about these strengths, the interesting element of this is while these are strengths of character, They are also seen as intimidating and often threatening to people who are insecure or institutions that are based on control and single narrative. And so if you're a scapegoat in that context, you are actually quite vulnerable because your self-differentiation actually creates a reactivity within those contexts that further isolates the scapegoat and creates potential for more targeting. And so that vulnerability comes also from the fact that scapegoats, often as these really deeply evolved human beings, typically do not have any desire within them to hurt or harm others, which means that the scapegoaters, those who are doing the scapegoating, in some ways, maybe subconsciously know that they can get away with harming the scapegoat because in some ways, perhaps they may not fight back because they are sort of these peace-oriented people of compassion. Scapegoats are deep-feeling individuals. They are gentle. They are kind, sensitive and perceptive, emotionally deep and sincere. And I think that these qualities can create a vulnerability for scapegoats because oftentimes the scapegoater takes it as an easy out, that the blame and accusations within a community can fall on that individual because they're seen as not going to fight back. But ultimately, the fighting back happens when that scapegoat realizes that they can't be blamed, they can't be shamed. And perhaps in removing themselves from that toxic situation, they can claim and reclaim those strengths of leadership and personality and character in a way that can be placed then in more sustainable relationships, sustainable professional contexts. And reclaiming that is really the answer to breaking down these systems of shame and blame that sort of spiral around the scapegoat. So if you're a scapegoat and you're wondering, how did this happen to me? Know that it's because you are a person of deep, deep integrity and that you are not to blame.